obviously all these like people are working on these things, and as these tickets are coming in, like how does a business figure out which ones they should start first and which ones might not be as important, right? Because there's obviously there's going to have to be a choice to be made on how to prioritize this stuff, and it can blow up pretty quickly. So how do you pick, and who gets to pick? I guess as far as that process goes.
Yeah, that's a very good question actually. And I think before I answer that, how do you prioritize? You need to understand basically how the crux works and how it's calculated, right? And where the biggest you're gonna get the biggest impact, right? So a lot of developers actually jump into the web performance without understanding how actually crux works and what Google is actually looking for, right? And there are a lot of misconception in the industry, and which result in a like lot of misprioritization actually, right? So that to give you an example, like a lot of people do not realize that the we are looking at the crux data, it actually also includes the logged in pages. Yeah? So things like my account, order tracking, the data is included for that. A lot of people just think, oh, Google can't actually crawl my sign in pages, which means that this data is not included in crux. That's how people see it because they're used to of not having logged in pages into the search index, the Google search. So they think it's not included, but crux is different. Actually, the logged in page data is included in crux, right? So you need to get your concept right first, basically how the crux is actually working. And crux also works based on the amount of traffic to a particular URL, right? If a URL does not have a lot of traffic, it's not never going to make a cut into the crux. And if the crux does not have the data for the URL, it's not going to treat it any differently. So you need to actually look at a lot of your data first. Go to the Google Search Console, look at the what type of URL are more indexed, and especially it's very easy in the e-commerce, right? If you see e-commerce, there are home pages, category pages, listing pages, and product detail pages, right? These are the pages where most of the traffic actually is concentrated. You may have a use case where you have a special reward program and it's very popular, so that may be a page behind the login which is popular. So you need to look at basically your data, what pages are popular, where, and in terms of the traffic, which pages get a lot of traffic, right? So typically listing pages get a lot of traffic on e-commerce website. So and if you're trying to optimize number of URLs actually which are passing this threshold, then you want to look at the listing pages because you may have a lot of listing and subcategory pages and things like that, right? And then if you focus all your effort on optimizing home page, then it's going to only improve just one URL. Okay. And then if you go to, let's say, PDPs, it's going to improve a lot of different URLs, but some of the PDPs may not even have enough traffic and may never be even part of the Crux database, right? So once you understand how the Crux is working, what it's doing, then there are multiple approaches, right? You basically look at with whatever tooling you have, whether it's a synthetic monitoring or RUM or whatever tool you have, just see where the big most problem actually lies, right? Where the degradation is. And remember, the Google starts to give you any advantage of this threshold being passed when a URL passes all three thresholds. If a URL does not pass all three core web vitals, it is not given any extra weightage. That's what the Google clarification is, right? So if you have, let's say, hundreds of URLs which are failing on all three core web vitals, then you are in a situation where you'll have to really look at prioritization. But let's say a situation where you have a huge number of URLs which are passing two core web vitals, but one specific core web vital like CLS is just on the border and it's not passing. Then you want to focus on that particular core web vitals in the short term and make sure that you turn that to green so that you start to get the benefit of the whatever weightage Google is giving you in the search engines, right? So there are, I think, before you even prioritize, first try to understand how things work in the background, how the Crux is working, what does it mean, what Google is basically advising you to do it, and sometimes the developers do not have time to go that deep into it. That's where I think be part of the right communities, follow the conversation, and once you have that, then another question comes is that generally the developers will get a lot of best practices. Do lazy loading, do the server side rendering, and do this and do that, right? Do Salesforce host custom fonts. You name it technique. If you were to list down all the performance optimization technique, there will be 20 or 30 different techniques. And now you need to figure out which one do I apply. And a lot of time, even if you apply, you have no way to measure it. Give you example, TLS. Somebody say, do TLS 1.3. Even if you enable that, you don't know how to measure it actually, which tool to use it, because the optimization is going to be in 5 to 10 millisecond benefit. You're not going to get more than 10 millisecond gain there typically. So it becomes very, very difficult. Sometimes you need to take a faith-based approach and just apply best practices no matter what. But sometimes even applying a simple best practice may result in a degradation. And then you realize that you don't have enough tool to actually see whether what you did was right or wrong. And a very good example of that is lazy loading. When a lot of developers implemented lazy loading, they also lazy loaded the hero image, which actually degraded the LCP. And everybody thought why it's doing that, but because you blindly applied that best practice. So I think my suggestion will be just to understand the basics of Crux, and then list down all the performance techniques. Don't go after everything. Avoid anything fancy and new, which Chrome has released just now, because typically it happens if Chrome releases something new, it takes at least 6 months for it to get baked in. There may be sometime bugs, and there may be sometime regressions. So you don't want to jump onto anything new and fancy immediately, unless it's a very easy to implement and very easy to roll back. So keep that in mind. I've been to a place where I will basically deploy something very, very new, and there'll be regression, and then you actually took the sprint bandwidth and also didn't get anything. So I would say wait for 6 months before you jump onto anything new. That will be another thing you can do to avoid a lot of noise and the new things which appear from time to time in the industry.